Hey addicts, welcome back to another comic review, and Happy New Year. This is the first issue in 2019, so glad we're able to start it off right, because the issue is not bad. There's a lot that goes on to it, so that's mainly one of the reasons why I enjoy it, because there's a lot to, digest. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. So we start off the issue with seeing Pamela address the Commonwealth, and in, true political fashion, it's kind of a mixture of half lies, half truths, and we even get to see that she kind of strongs arm Rick to make a address to the Commonwealth, and she's basically saying that, there was an assassination attempt on her life, and Rick is her savior, which, technically that is true, but there's some construing and lies mixed into that. But we get to see that Rick makes a interesting statement, saying that he wants to, help be there for the Commonwealth and try to solve things peacefully. Very much like what Rick has been talking about in the last couple issues. But they have this panel of Mercer kind of watching in the background. You can tell he's kind of like, man, I don't know what to think of him right now. Or at least that's the impression I got. You can definitely tell he's got a lot brewing in his mind. Then we get to see back at Alexandria, Magna is still in charge. I think we touched on this last issue. It feels really awkward having Magna in charge of Alexandria, or being left in charge, considering how many other people have been there longer than her, and I would assume Rick trusts a little bit more, but it's fine. She's finally getting some time to shine and let us get to know her a little bit more, so everything's okay. But we get to see that she is kind of uneasy on not knowing what's going on at the Commonwealth, since they haven't heard anything from Rick and gang, and so she decides to send Sadiq back to the Commonwealth. But since she's kind of low on dispersing people, she wants to have Sadiq go to the hilltop, ask for Maggie's help in getting kind of a little entourage together to go with Sadiq, and then figure out what's going on. So let's see here. Then we get to jump back at the Commonwealth with Mercer, and it's just not his day. First he gets, the governor and Rick kind of, in his eyes, probably, working together to cover up some things. And then, we get to see that he gets another kicker with going back to his apartment, seeing the princess getting ready to leave, and just hightail it out of there. And this leads to us seeing finally some, I guess you could call it, character development with the princess, getting a little bit more of her background. I don't really want to touch too heavily on this, because, I think different people look at it different ways or appreciate it more or less. For me, I didn't really like it. Her background specifically seems a little forced, and I don't want to say forced because it's fine to have characters that have these backgrounds, but just in the climate that we're in today's terms, it seems like, he just put it in there because of that reason. But I will say it does have, I guess, one redeeming quality, and that is that, explain briefly that, she had a background of abuse, and she saw all men as monsters. And that's the part that I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. It's just, I don't like that at all. But the one redeeming quality of it is that you actually see that she's like, I met you. She's talking about Mercer, and I started having a different light, and I'm really trying to get out of that. I guess you could say, what would be a correct word for this? I guess like the response, like her. Not generic, but her go-to response, is to be like, these people are no good, but she's trying to change her way of thinking on that. So, yeah, it's a thing. It's not entirely important. I think a lot of people might be disappointed with this, but a lot of people may not even care, because I don't think the princess has really been that liked since she's been introduced. So, take it or leave it how you will. Still up in the air at this point on I'm still really neutral to the princess. If anything, this just goes to show me that, Kirkman, what are you doing putting in these little things here? But regardless of that, spent way too much time on that. We get to go back to the hilltop, and we get to see that Sophia and I'm just gonna call him Glasses because he has the same name as I do, and I don't like doing that. But his name's Josh. He's the guy that was in the last issue. They were gearing up for a date, or like they had, I guess, like their first meeting each other, and so now we can see that they're actually fully on a date. They're just talking about random stuff of like, oh, what's bad things that happened to you, because that's perfect first date dinner conversation. And then we get to see that Carl is kind of being a little stalkery. He's watching kind of their things go down through like his window in the bedroom when he's with Lydia. And I think a lot of these things that happen in this issue, it does happen in an organic way, but in certain instances it doesn't feel right for that specific character, or it just kind of seems to go with the stereotype. For this instance, it seems very like a stereotype that Lydia would be like, oh, so you love her, huh? Do you love her more than me? Or, kind of like that whole jealousy teen reaction bullshit. But, we get to see that Carl is like trying to explain how he feels, but again, in another stereotype, he's not able to really convey that very well. And so that ends up Lydia being stormed off because he basically called her a monster. But in fairness, he called both of them monsters. But we'll get to see a little bit more of that, I guess, conclude in the later part of the issue. But next we get to see that Dwight's former girlfriend, guys, put it in the comments if you remember this chick's name. For the life of me, I haven't been able to remember her name since like the second issue of the New Beginning, and they like barely say it. So if you remember her name, please put it down there. But because I'm having to force calling it Dwight's girlfriend, but now it's like Dwight's widow. But yeah, we get to see that she confronts Mercer and kind of hints at this brewing alliance that they might make to get some payback for Dwight. Since he's not there to do it himself. Fuck you, Kirkman. No, I'm just kidding. But still, though, that's probably one of the. Never mind. You know my feelings. Go watch the other one if you want to hear what I think about Dwight's death. But moving on, we get to see an actual encounter with Michonne and Rick, and this is. I'll be honest. I see what at least I think I see where Kirkman's going with the Commonwealth now, or at least I got some inkling of an idea. And I'm not really liking his pathway for Michonne, but let me explain a little bit why. Because we get to see Michonne, and she's coming to like apologize to Rick for everything that went down, but we're also seeing that she's standing her ground real firmly. She's like, yeah, I'm sorry it had to go like that, Rick, but he was unhinged. Like, he was progressively getting worse, which, I mean, Rick can't really deny the things that Michonne's pointing out, but she's so callous in the way that she says it that it just really seems out of place for somebody that, for one, has been with Rick so long, and two, who was, Dwight was part of their group. So that's a little, like, the first little hint of, like, and then on the way to that, also, you get to see that she's kind of got this, and again, like, kind of like I was originally saying, she's kind of got this new air about her where you can tell that the Commonwealth is rubbing off on her. She's becoming more privileged. She's becoming to the point where she's kind of speaking down to people as though they're inferior, and you kind of get this condescending nature even when she's talking towards Rick, with after she kind of apologizes. Rick comes out and like is generally like saying, I'm sorry, maybe I overreacted a little bit. I mean, you don't really get that. He just says, I'm sorry, but you can tell the way it's written, it's a little bit more genuine than, or at least it felt to me, it came off a little bit more genuine than Michonne's. And like the first thing she does is like just say, oh, what was that? I couldn't quite hear that. Kind of plays this like douchey nature. And then, I like how Rick kind of snaps back and we're like, a man's dead, Michonne. Come on. But, that leads to a whole different thing of Michonne basically subtly threatening Rick, with Rick saying that, he came to this diner. They're talking at that diner place where he cried a few issues ago. And, he's like, yeah, I'm trying to get my head, back into it to where, like, this is how good they have it. I want to make sure we don't screw this up. And Michonne has, the way she phrases it comes across as threatening, but she's like, right back at you. I'll do anything to keep it like this, kind of that I'm paraphrasing, but you get that kind of vibe. So that wraps up with that. We get to go back to the Hilltop, and I want to make note of this because I think it might play later on, especially if you get some conflicts at home bases. But I think it doesn't really have much issue here. But that's where Siddiq actually gets to the Hilltop, and you get to see that the guards are really laxed. They're having a conversation, and Siddiq pulls up. And they're like, whoa, who's there? And he's like, bro, I signaled way back there. Didn't you see it? And they're like, oh, it's been so quiet lately. I haven't really been paying attention. And I think they might play that into there if they want to do another surprise attack or something like that on the Hilltop. I think, whether you say it might be a rehash of what we got in the Whisperer War or whatnot, going back previously than that, I still think, at least setting it up subtly here now does help it if it does come off later on, even if it does seem a little rehashy. But then we get to see that, Siddiq gets inside and Maggie has a few people there and she's leaving it up to volunteers. And I do like that approach to Maggie. It's like, you don't know where you're sending them and it's a long ways away. I really would only want people to go if they really want to. And we get to see that they do get a few volunteers. We get to see Jesus, Aaron, and Dante. They're fully up going it. And then at the last minute, Carl, he's like, yeah, there's really nothing here. If things are kind of bad right now, I might as well go, especially if my dad's in trouble. But, we get the Carl and Lydia makeup. And they leave on good terms, which I know some people might be like, well, if they make up and we just got this conflict, because it was, I believe, like 2 or 3 pages before this that they had their whole little interaction. And I know some people are like, well, what's the point of this, if they just made up? And I agree to a certain extent, but also, we don't get to see much of Carl and Lydia, especially since, the introduction of the Whisperers. And so it's little moments like these that, kind of give not only some development to the character, but also just leads into what they've been doing or, how they've been feeling or, just making sure, keeping that vibe that, these are real people, whatever. And so I do like that, even if you might say it takes up, parts of the issue that you'd rather see on. That's probably a personal opinion, but for some of you out there, I'm good with it either way. I like seeing it when they do it. If it's not there, I don't really cry bullshit, But we get to see that after that, we get to go back to the Mercer. This is the tail end of the issue where Mercer goes to the locker room of all of the guards at the Commonwealth, and he's kind of doing the call to arms, kind of like I'm not going to make that reference because that's probably going to be taken wrong, but he's getting people like, hey, is this how you want to live? Why do we keep doing this? And then we know that he got screwed because what's the name of the guy that's the second to Pamela. Shoot, I'm not remembering his name right now. It's something, now I don't remember, but he comes in and is like, oh, Mercer, Pamela's going to be so disappointed when she finds out. And that's how it ends on that cliffhanger. His revolution just getting shut down before it's even started. Let me put, okay, I got a few things I want to talk about. The issue as a whole, and then going on to the next issue. But I just want to say for you guys out there, last month's issue was really bad. It had some good parts, maybe, if you could call them that, but overall, wasn't really liking this. This issue, it's got a lot in it. I think it's definitely worth your money if you paid for it individually, because there's a lot that goes on in here. And I think this is the issue that people will finally have an idea, or, you know, at least be able to grab some speculation as to what's going to be happening with the Commonwealth. But at the same time, it's really something about it, and I think it's mainly the characters and them acting kind of differently, or, you know, just the whole situation seems like a shitty one. So I don't want to say for people, I don't want to say don't read this, but I will say that, you know, if you're waiting till the volumes come out, or even the compendium, I think that's a good strategy. If you're, you know, somebody like me that, you know, supports the comic whenever there's like the bigger bundles, like the compendiums, but, you know, until that point, you kind of just get to read it however which way you can. I'd say that's probably the best strat right now, because I think this is very mixed. Some people are patient, they're willing to wait and see what's going on, and then others are like bouncing out because it's just not looking good, or it's not looking any different from what they've seen. And I'm kind of more in that point, which is why, you know, I'm kind of on saying whether or not to buy it. But you know, I think it's just, you know, depends on how you're going to look at things. But I would say, for my personal belief, I would say if you can read the issues some other way, I would suggest not spending, you know, like $4. Sorry, Skybound, for saying that. Won't get sponsored by them saying that kind of shit, but you know how it goes. Anyway, I want to talk about the ending of this issue and going on to the next issue. But first, I want to mention, I did like how they kind of sidestep our expectations a little bit with the cover this week, saying, I think it was The Road Back, right? Let me look here real quick. I have it up. Yeah, The Road Back. And, you know, a lot of people were thinking that Rick was going to be going back to Alexandria, and we were going to get, you know, kind of like a separation from him in a little bit, and they actually subverted that, because The Road Back was talking about Sadiq and the group that he's getting, and they're going to be going back to the Commonwealth. So I did like that, and that gives us a little bit more insight to the next issue. But kind of speculation-wise, I wanted to talk because I feel like somebody snitched on Mercer. I feel like it's probable that Pamela, after seeing the whole situation with Dwight and you know, everything like that popping off, that she might say to the people, and even to Rick, you know, face to face, that, oh, don't worry, you know, the situation was dealt with. We understand that he does not represent the whole. You're fine, whatever. But I feel like if they do play it off like this, where, you know, Pamela was like backstabbing, was like said it that way, and then, and, you know, actuality, she's behind the scenes being like, okay, I want you to keep an eye on this person, and this person. But the only problem with that is I don't believe Pamela knows that Dwight and Mercer had an interaction. And I feel like with Michonne, she definitely knows that they had that interaction, and since she's already cried wolf once before, I feel like that's maybe the direction that Kirkman is going, that Michonne is the whistleblower in this, and is snitching again. With that being said, I don't really like the direction they're taking with Michonne right now. I feel like it is, I don't want to say it's unbelievable, but I do question if that would be as easy of a turn as she seems like she's getting. Now, granted, you know, with the comic, it bounced around a lot, so we don't really know specifically how long she's been staying there. I would assume it's at least, at the bare minimum, a few weeks. We maybe even get into the months category now. But still, though, I think this is a really drastic change to her character. It's something that I don't really know. Like, for instance, let me put it this way. You know, I feel like as a mother, I wouldn't know, guys. I'm a man, okay? But I would feel like if they want to play it off as it's her motherly instinct, you know, she's trying to do the best for their daughter. She's trying to protect the world that her daughter's living in because it seems like the safest place out there. I would believe that more if they want to go that route. It's like one of those that I don't really believe that she has a stronger connection to her daughter than Rick's group. That's the part that I'm like, I think that kind of it just kind of what's the word? It kind of crosses out that mother instinct type explanation, because yes, you know, she is her family, but I mean, Rick's group is like a family that, at least from what we've seen, that has a stronger tie to her. So that's like one of those, like, you know, if they play that route where she's just trying to be a mother, I'll accept it. But I really, in actuality, I don't think it would be that fast of a turn. I think it's, yes, believable in time, perhaps, but I mean, everybody's different. But yeah, I get to see, you know, kind of where they're coming from. But Michonne, I feel like Kirkman is kind of setting her up to be a villain, and I think, and let me clarify here. I don't think it will be like a villain that we've seen before, and I think that's kind of what Kirkman meant when he said a while ago that this is going to be like a big shakeup and it's going to be different than some of the others, and it's kind of led me to think that we're going to see a similar scenario, but instead of it being, you know, a bad guy versus the good guys and they have a clash, I think it's going to be more of like, we're going to see a story where the antagonist isn't really evil or bad in a certain way. They might be misguided, but I don't think we'll see somebody that Rick's going to have a definitive side on which he's going to stand. I think it's going to be really blurry. I think Rick's going to have a lot of issues going ahead. And that's kind of one of the things that, you know, leads into some of the other stuff. I think, I mean, sorry if I'm going to take a little minute here because I wrote it down just to make sure I didn't forget it. Yeah, so Mercer, I think at the moment, just judging how we saw him interact, or react, I should say, and then kind of talk with some of the other people in this issue, I feel like Mercer, you know, he used to be on board with Rick, especially when Dwight was kind of, you know, fueling that. But since Dwight's gone and we saw the reaction that Rick gave in front of the people of the Commonwealth, I think Mercer's probably going to take a step back and he might become more neutral towards Rick and be like, I don't see you as an enemy because I can tell you're not like Pamela, but I don't think that Mercer would be able to side with Rick full-heartedly now, or even be against going up, you know, having confrontation with him if Rick decided to go with Pamela. So I think that's kind of where Mercer's at right now. This might lead to, you know, Rick being more of like having to support or choose. I think their lines are going to get really blurry here. I think it's going to be a confrontation with, you know, like Mercer and like the people behind him versus Pamela and like Michonne and the people behind her. And then Rick's and like, you know, the people with Rick is going to be caught in this crossfire and they're going to have to choose, well, do we choose the people that are clearly oppressed and we do have a connection with them, or do we side with the person that we do know and take a risk in the faith that they're trusting with this other person? And so it's going to be, I will say that's intriguing, and it is different than what we've seen before. I just don't know if Michonne was a good medium for that storyline. Granted, I think if you would have picked a different character, we'd be like, oh yeah, it's black and blue. Just go with this. Just go with Mercer, because, like, for instance, if it was Magna, I feel like that would be more believable since we don't know much about her, or we don't have much of she doesn't have much of a connection with Rick's group. But at the same time, would people or Rick even be that iffy on which side to go with? So in a sense, I get why Michonne was picked for this, but at the same time, looking back at her character, I don't think it fits. I mean, obviously, they could switch it around. They could make it more, fall in lines exactly how the other storylines were. But I think this is a little bit better gauge of like what Kirkman's going for and what storyline we're going to see. And I feel pretty good about that prediction. I'll be honest. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I think that's just the more obvious scenario. Again, stories, Hollywood, they like to just throw shit out there. So, who knows? Maybe it's going to be some wild stuff. But in closing, I wanted to just briefly look at the new cover. I'm not going to show it today just because it would take time for me to pull it up on my phone. But I have it on my computer here. You can go check it out. It's called Falling Into Place. And we get to see that it's Siddiq's group. And before, I was kind of iffy on like who these people were, but because it's in color. But you get to see that that's Siddiq. It looks like Dante, Jesus, and I believe Aaron. So we don't get to see Carl in the cover, but we do get to see that they're on a road and there's a city and Princess is standing in the middle of the road. So we have this comment that Maggie said, if it looks safe, go check in. If it's not looking right, then, just bounce and come back here. And I think this might lead to them meeting up with the princess. Obviously, we don't know how much the princess knows, like Rick and Michonne and their like situation. But I believe that their group might, catch up with the princess first, and they might retreat back hearing the news, and maybe thinking, well, it's better to just go back, and decide what to do than just run in there blind, since we know there's confrontation somewhat of brewing. And I think that's probably, the most part of Falling Into Place. The only thing I can think about that is, Pamela might try to set Mercer straight. She might want to set Mercer as an example, to let the other guards fall in line. Again, that's going to put Rick in a really tight position because he's going to have to decide, well, do I set aside and, let the same thing happen to Mercer as what happened to Dwight? Or am I going to step in and I'm going to try to come up with a better, more peaceful solution that apparently Pamela's not going to be up for? But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Really curious to see, going forward. I will say, like I've stated, it's interesting, and I think, after seeing this issue, they can play it differently than the other storylines. But like I said, with the characters and everything like that, I don't know how excited I am to see that. But I am intrigued to see how he's going to approach it. So I'm going to be back, again for the next issue and the issue after that, and we'll tackle it when it gets here. If it's a piece of garbage, I'll let you guys know. And yeah, sorry this is a little bit longer, but there was a lot to unpack. There was one other connection I was going to make, and I don't remember it now. Maybe if I remember it, I'll comment it, or I'm sure one of you guys will maybe point it out. But that's all for this video, and I'll just see you guys in the next issue. The show is coming back, I think the first or second week of February, so we got a little ways away, but so we'll probably get one more comic out before then or around then. But yeah, stay tuned because more stuff's coming. Anyway, X, peace.